right, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to talk about 2024 planning. So we're going to talk from everything from the planning execution, selecting our goals, how we allocate our budget, all the way till actually executing on those goals that we set for ourselves. But before we dive into that, I want to take a minute to introduce our two amazing panelists we have with us today, Casey and Bob. Casey, maybe we can start with you. Would you mind just doing a quick introduction of yourself and your agency?
Sure. My name is Casey Rausin. I am from Care on the Block in East Tennessee in the Knoxville area. I'm a nurse by trade and started with Care on the Block about 11 years ago as a care manager out in the field and have done a little bit of everything since starting. But I'm currently serving as the COO for Care on the Block, and it's been a fun ride.
Maybe Bob, let's go over to you. If you don't mind doing a quick introduction as well.
Yeah, I'm Bob Nations. I'm a senior helper owner in Northern California. My home base is Napa, and I have 3 senior helper territories, and I'm the owner operator in those 3 territories.
Nice. All right. Well, why don't we dive right into this? We know the old saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So let's start off right at the beginning. Both of you told me how important it is to do proper planning before actually setting your goals. So Casey, let's start with you. You talked a little bit about how you incorporate a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat analysis, more commonly known as SWOT, into your 2024 planning. Can you dive into a little bit about the prep work, whether it's SWOT or other things that you do before moving forward?
Yes. So before our annual 2024 planning meetings, there's several steps that our leadership team takes to prepare. So we all go through a process of collecting data for our individual departments. We look at the current state of the business and how our departments affect that. Look at our departmental metrics, financial data, marketing trends, customer and employee feedback, and any other information that would be pertinent to the data collection piece. And then the next step is to do an internal assessment. So looking at the internal aspects of the organization. So what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses in relation to operations and processes, team dynamics? What ability do we have to take on new projects and areas and opportunities for growth? Do we need to hire in order to be able to change our goals for the next year? So the next piece that we do is we look externally, and this involves like understanding marketing trends, assessing the competition in our market. If we're going to head into new markets, like, what does that look like? Doing that market research, and then recognizing the opportunity or the potential opportunities and threats just in the industry as a whole.
Appreciate that. And then leading off of that, you talked a little bit, maybe we can go to you, Bob. In our conversations, you talked a little bit about shopping the market. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means and how that factors into your analysis and planning?
Well, generally we start the planning process about an October timeframe. So we go out and we basically shop our competitors, right? We pick 5 competitors. We do a phone call, pretend like, we're looking for help for our mom, and we find out what kind of services they're offering. We look at their pricing so we can kind of get an idea what the market's doing. And then we also evaluate how they answer their phones and, how they're presenting themselves. So it's all part of our evaluation process. And then we move into we look at what the government's going to do for the year. Are they going to raise minimum wage? We start looking at what our costs are going to be, our workman's comp, our insurance cost. We start analyzing that kind of data so we can start pulling all that together. Never done a kind of a formal SWOT analysis like Casey's talking about, but I love the idea, and I'm going to incorporate that in. But we end up at the same place. We're looking at internal staff, who's working, who's not working, and what marketing things are working, what they're not working. So those are the kinds of things we start to process in October.
Nice. So now we've got a lot of our planning underway. It's time to decide. We know strategy is often more of what you say no to than what you say yes to. We have limited budget, we have limited people. We want to make sure we're using those resources effectively. Talk to me about how you take that planning work and decide what to factor into your yearly goals. And maybe, Bob, we'll start with you this time. What other considerations outside of revenue do you consider in setting your 2024, but also your yearly goals?
Well, I think first of all, you have to understand, and people are surprised when I say this, there's a seasonality to our business. So first thing we do is we kind of look at the seasonality of the business and determine where we have those ups and downs and why they occurred. And then we move into what other new opportunities do we have? Where do we want to shift the company for the new year? An example would be, and because we're here with Sensi, is 3 years ago, Sensi became part of our life, and that became a part of our strategy plan for the year 2020 and 2021. 2019, I was incorporating a training center. So those all become factors as to, what we're going to focus on. One thing I learned a long time ago, I don't want to take on too much. I've got to focus the team and really only take on one major project that we're going to do for the year. That way we can focus on really why we're here, and that's to take care of the people.
Right. And then Casey, maybe over to you. I know when we were talking in your 2024 assessment, you set goals outside of just revenue and hours. What are some of those other areas that you and your team identified that you wanted to prioritize?
Yeah, so some of the additional areas in which we set goals are technology. So one of our three uniques at our company is that we're leaders in technology and innovation. And I really believe that, technology is the future of home care. We're always looking for opportunities to help us optimize care and keep our clients more independent and safe at home. So an example of a technology goal would be to have like a certain percentage of clients utilizing technology in the next year. Another area is employee training and development. This can include employee training programs, helping employees get certifications, skill building initiatives. This is really important to help staff stay current on trends and best practices. So we're currently working on this right now. So we want to have a certain number of our caregivers to send them to CNA school each quarter over the next year. So another place is community engagement. That's always part of our planning each year. So we love to offer education programs at partner facilities throughout the year. And then brand reputation and marketing. This may include, improving an online presence. I think that's where a lot of us spend our time trying to improve that right now. And that's really easy to track progress with online analytics and goals there. So.
And then maybe let's stay with you, Casey, because I know Bob just mentioned how he just said he wants to take one big goal to prioritize his team. He doesn't want to chew too much. You're doing your SWOT analysis and your other prep. I'm sure there's a lot of other ideas that didn't necessarily make the cut. So how do you prioritize that as a business owner, thinking about what makes the cut and what doesn't?
Yeah, so I am not as good as Bob is only picking one thing. So I'm the worst, and I'm always like that shiny carrot that gets dangled in front of me. I'm like, oh yeah, let's do this too. So I probably cause my staff a lot of stress doing that sometimes. But when we're doing these SWOT meetings and our strategy meetings, so we do an annual meeting once a year, but then we also meet every quarter and kind of go through the same process again. It's not really a full SWOT each quarter, but we're looking at what's working, not working, what's missing, and what's confusing. And then out of that each quarter, we also come up with what we call rocks to work on each quarter to try and push the business forward as well. But in each of these meetings, what we always end up going back to is our vision traction organizer. And that's what houses our goals, our guarantee, our three uniques, our mission statement. It's all in this vision traction organizer. And we just ask ourselves if this plan aligns with our 1 year, 3 year, and 10-year goals. And if we put our focus here, will it ultimately push us forward to achieve what we're trying to achieve? And that's how we try to prioritize.
Like that. And you talked a little bit about the 3 to 5 year vision. Maybe over to you, Bob. We were talking a bit about that as well. Maybe walk me through how you think of your yearly goals contributing to that 3 to 5 year vision that you have for your business.
Well, I want to pick up on something that Casey said a minute ago, because I think it's something we have in common. One of the things that we focus on is our community involvement. We are driven, and our success has a lot to do with our community involvement. So that has a lot to do with it, because we sit down with community partners and talk about what their goals are, and so how we can align ourselves in that way, so that we're working together as a whole community versus just focusing on, oh, Bob Nation's company, this is what we're doing, and this is how. So we go about it in that way, which leads us down the path of developing our 3 to 5 year plan and how that all incorporates. And it always, I love, the involvement we have in the community and how much we do in that regard.
Okay. So we've got our goals, we've done our prep. Now it's time to develop and allocate our budget. We know that budgets, unfortunately, are never infinite, so we have to be really thoughtful about where we put those goals and where we factor that budget. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the costs and some of the costs that might get overlooked or even missed entirely that can have a huge impact on your business. Casey, let's start with you. We know there's costs like fixed costs like rent and wage adjustment, those types of things. What would be a few of those indirect costs that agencies might not take into account when planning that can be really harmful throughout the year?
So one of the biggest, I think, is overtime. That can kill you at a home care company. But the others are training costs, employee turnover. The more turnover you have, the more money you're going to spend on training. Others are mileage and downtime. We watch that really closely as well. But then a couple more, like employee retention and recognition programs. We put a lot of a focus on that in the past couple of years, and also trying to get more referrals from existing employees. So we're actually in the process of rolling out a new employee retention like bonus program. And so really interested to see, a year from now, like what that does for us as far as retention, and then even just employees morale too. I'm hoping it creates its own little mentoring program too, but I think that those are some of the areas that, they just change from month to month. They can be so different, especially the training and turnover costs.
And then Bob, I know you mentioned at the beginning in the planning side, you do a bit of a market analysis to look at some of the competitors. So how does that maybe factor into maybe some of the price increases that most agencies are looking at doing on a yearly basis? Any fluctuation in hours, average revenue per clients? We are looking at referrals and how that might change. What are some of the other things that maybe I left out, or how those things that I mentioned factor into your thought process?
Well, one of the things I wanted to bring up, and it was one of our success stories during 2020 in the middle of COVID, we had a nice increase that year, and primarily was because we called clients on a regular basis to check in with them to make sure how they were doing, if they need anything, do we want to go grocery shopping? Those kinds of things went on during COVID, which taught me a lot, because our increase really came from our existing clients who kept adding hours because of those phone calls. So we've incorporated that. We always did satisfaction calls, and we've always done that, but it becomes more specific now when we check in with people and ask them very specific questions. How are you? It used to be, how are you doing? How are you getting along with our caregiver? What can we do different? But now it's more specific about what we can do to help them. Are you getting good food? Are you getting fresh food? How's your water intake? All those things we asked during the assessment. It's a good reminder for us to go back and ask those kinds of questions and talk about that, which helps with our average. But in California, we're always having to look at what the government's doing, because every single year there's always an increase in minimum wage. There's increase in cost. I mean, this year they've decided that they've increased our sick time allotment, right? So was before we had to allow 24 hours of sick time. This year we have to allow 40 hours of sick time, which impacts our cost, because that's money that's not tied to revenue necessarily. And going back to what Casey said, we look at overtime. That is the killer of our business if we don't keep control of that. And she also mentioned mileage. Mileage also can be pretty impactful when you look at that. So those are the factors that we stay on top of on a regular basis to make sure that we minimize the impact of them on our business.
So now that we have our direction, we've done our planning, we've picked our goals, we've been really thoughtful about our budgeting, the work has actually just started. Now we actually have to execute on all of those visions that we've set forth. So let's talk a little bit about how you keep your goals front of mind, not only for yourselves, but also for the rest of your team. And Casey, let's start with you, because you had something really interesting where you talk not only about how you measure those goals on a frequent basis, but also a really interesting way of how you tie an incentive program to those goals as well for the rest of your team. Maybe talk me through that a little bit.
Yes. So every week, we start every Monday. Our leadership team meets every Monday for a weekly meeting. We review our goals. We review our scorecard, and it has all of our goals and our metrics on there, what we're tracking. And then straight out of that meeting, I go into a meeting with my middle management team, and we do the same thing. And then we have one-on-ones. For anybody that's not in those meetings, we have those throughout the week too. So lots of meetings, but it does help keep everyone aligned. And it keeps everybody to be, it's cohesive. It includes the entire team on what the company's trying to do. So it's not just the people at the top that are trying to achieve the goals. It includes everybody from, from our care partners to our receptionists. Everybody in our company has a number. Everybody has an incentive program. It took us a while to roll that out. Like we started with our care partners getting quarterly bonuses, and now every department, throughout our entire company has a program. Whether they can get paid, the bonuses can be weekly, monthly, or quarterly, depending on the position that they're in. But each person's goals are really tailored to their role and responsibility. So it makes them more accountable, for what they're trying to do each day. And it's made a huge difference in the organization, in morale, and just it gives people more autonomy of the work that they're doing each day.
I love that, how you bring it all the way down to the bottom, even to the receptionist, and how often they're picking up the phone. I think that's an amazing thing to try to work towards and achieve. So maybe to you, Bob, similar type of idea. How do you measure your annual goals with your team? How do you keep it front of mind? But then also, how do you maybe think about maybe making any adjustments throughout the year if needed based off of new information and how things are progressing?
Well, we do something similar to what Casey does, in that, first of all, we start off with everybody and plan our goals together so that everybody's aware of what everyone's goals are. And there's always overlap. The recruitment, the HR department has a goal that's similar to one that scheduling has about lost hours, because if they're not recruiting the right people, then in fact are getting enough people or the right people, that means we're going to lose hours. So there's an overlap there. And that's true throughout the company, where we have overlaps between staff members depending on their role, so that they're supporting one another and holding each other accountable for getting to their goals. And then last year I started a program where we've added a monthly bonus. So every month we sit down and each staff member has a worksheet that they have to fill out and present to management that says, okay, here was my goal, and here's how I achieved my goal. And then as we go along, of course, we refine those goals. We find out the goal was too easy or the goal was too difficult, because of whatever impact it is. We will make those adjustments as we go along, but generally don't make those at least for a couple of months so we can see the trend of it. And then again, we review them every month with everybody, and it turns into a bonus for everyone depending on how they've achieved their goals.
I think that's really helpful. So we've talked everything from all the way from planning to prepping and the execution of our yearly goals, which is huge. Maybe what are some of the other approaches that you may use that fall a little outside of this discussion so far that might be helpful for you? So Casey, I know when talking to you, it's not only how you approach it that might be a little bit different, but also when you approach your planning for the coming year, that was a little different. Maybe walk me through what works well for your agency.
Yeah, so like Bob mentioned earlier, like sometimes this business is very seasonal, and this time of year is a busy season. So in home care, you have lots of solo agers, and their kids only visit this time of year. They only come and see mom and dad at Christmas or Thanksgiving, and that's when they realize that they're not doing as good as they were last year. So this is a really, really busy time of year. And then also, we're all focused on our families, and it's busy and it's stressful, and it's just a busy time of year. So we do not do our annual planning this time of year. So our annual planning is done in the summer. So our strategy year is July to July. Our fiscal year is January to December. But we just found that it's just too hard during the holidays to be able to have a clear mind and really focus on setting those goals for the company. So we've been doing that for a really long time, and the entire leadership team takes 2 days out of the office. We do our SWOT analysis, and we do that 1 week. And then the following week, we meet with our management teams out of the office, because if you do it in the office, you'll never get it done because people bother you and interrupt you, and they always need you. It's amazing how they don't need you when you're not there, though. So, but we always do it outside the office, and, try to make a good day of it, have a bunch of good food, have some fun, do some team building exercises. And we just found that that's a better time of year to really focus on those big annual goals.
Nice. And then for you, Bob, maybe we can kind of wrap it up a little bit here. If there was one thing you wanted the audience to take away when thinking about their yearly planning, what would that golden nugget, or what would those golden nuggets be that you would really want to leave them with as the key takeaways?
Well, I think you said it in the beginning, Spencer, create a plan. If you haven't planned, then you're not set up for success. You do have to be flexible, though. I mean, you create a plan and have flexibility because of the way this business works. There's never a day that's the same. So you've got to build that somewhat into your plan, your flexibility. And you got to find creative ways to execute the plan. Sometimes the plan needs to be tweaked here or there. So you got to be flexible, and you've got to be creative. And the most important thing, and I think Casey said it, and we try and do it here all the time, is have fun. This is such a serious business because we're really taking care of people who, for whatever reason, is not able to do as much as they did in the past. So it gets a little stressful in our office, and making sure that we're doing that, and making sure shifts are filled, and making sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I make an effort to try and at least get together and have lunch or spend some time doing something that is fun for the group. I know that sounds a little crazy because it's a serious business, but I think it's important to have that downtime and make sure everyone stops working in the office. They're not in their computer. We're having lunch. I'm big about questions, and we all get to know each other. What's your favorite color? What's your movie? So that we get to know each other a little bit. We're all working together, but we also laugh and have fun at times.
I like that. And maybe Casey, for you as well, what would those golden nuggets be for you that you would want the audience to leave with today?
I agree with that. It's definitely about having a plan. Like if you don't know where you're at and where you want to go, you'll look back 2 years from now and you'll be sitting in the same place that you were. And I've always been that way. Like even before I got into business, like when I was a kid, I was always setting goals and do that, in my personal life still. Like I see these memes all the time about like I remember praying for where I am now and like setting goals for where I am now. And like that's the truth. Like if you don't, it's just a dream if you don't do anything to make it happen. And you've got to speak those things into existence and believe in it. Like, don't be afraid. That's the thing. Don't be afraid to set like a crazy goal. Like, don't be afraid to set something that like you really, really want to do, or like throw something out there, because if you work hard enough and do the right things, like you can make it happen. And if you get everybody on board, like if you've got like one or two people like focused on trying to make something happen, but if you've got 20 people in your office trying to help you achieve this one thing, and you're transparent about it and everybody's excited about it, and we're going to do this, and you take it from the top down, like really, really, really great things can happen. And it's super exciting, to look back a year from now and see all the things that you really were able to accomplish, and then be able to celebrate that as a team. So celebrate the wins all throughout the year.
You can't get there, Casey, unless you create a goal and create a plan for it, right? I mean,
Right.
even crazy things, you really got to set a plan together and set a goal for it.
That's right.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end our 2024 yearly goal planning exercise. I want to thank both Casey and Bob for sharing their experience, their wisdom. I think any owner who watches this can take at least one or two things away that they can factor in and improve in their yearly process. So thank you both, and I hope everybody has an amazing holiday. So happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays to you.
Thank you for having me.